Hi everyone, welcome to this tutorial for Countrywide by Tommy Emmanuel. Now before we continue, I first want to point out the two gentlemen on the credit roll here. Both Robert and Christer are the first two top tier patrons on my Patreon site. If you want to support the channel, or if you are looking for tablature, notation or early access to other videos, then please head over to the site as well. Now on to the song itself. Countrywide is the ideal challenge for the starting fingerstyle player. If you have the basic boom-chick pattern down, if you have some experience with hammer-ons, pull-offs and bar chords, and you know how to play certain songs like Freight Train, like Windy and Warm, then this might be the song that's ideal to lift your fingerstyle technique up to the next level. It's all here: a catchy melody, colorful chords in the bridge, a funky ending to the bridge with a little single note line that really pops out, and if you really want to challenge, a really tough and fast single note lick all the way at the end of the song. But all of this is actually quite manageable. Maybe except for that very final last lick, that's a really tough one, but everything else is actually quite manageable. The tempo isn't that high, no breakneck speeds like Luttrell or Fuel, Timberlake Road, other songs we looked at recently. This is actually quite doable. And before I forget, I split up the tutorial in two different parts again. This is only to do with your ease of viewing. As I can imagine, you always have to rewind certain parts to get a second look at something I just played or something I just explained, and I think that's actually quite a lot easier if the play bar only contains half an hour of music instead of a full hour of music. If you think differently about this, then just let me know down below in the comments. I can always change it in the future. So the reason why all of this is doable is Tommy actually wrote this song really quickly. He was booked for a studio session to write a theme song for a Australian TV show. He showed up, he looked at the footage at 11 o'clock, half an hour later the song was finished, and by 1 o'clock the song had to be transferred to the studio in order to be put on the footage for broadcast that evening. That's probably the reason why this one isn't that difficult or that filled up with all sorts of tricks and licks and variations. It's quite straightforward. If you watch Tommy play this song now, there are a lot of new variations, a lot of extra tricks in there, but since I wanted to make this tutorial for the more beginner fingerstyle guitarist, I stuck to the original, which is quite straightforward with a lot of repetition and very little variations in between. So let's have a go. The guitar is in standard tuning. Let's have a look at the intro first, but as you'll see, this is nothing too difficult. Let me play it one time for you, then I'm gonna come back and explain. That's it. So let's have a look. All of the intro is built around an A minor chord. You're using the basic boom-chick bass pattern, covering 3 strings, so A string, D string, E string, D string, and on top you're arpeggiating that A minor chord using only 2 fingers, middle finger on the B string, index finger on the G string. Only on the second beat, on the second bass line, do you have to pluck 2 notes at the same time, thumb and middle finger, and then all the way through, the rest of the chord is the arpeggio is alternating between the thumb, index finger, thumb, middle finger. So really slowly. First beat, only the bass note. And second beat, thumb and middle finger together. Followed straight away by the index finger on the G string. And then afterwards, the next 2 beats is each time a bass note and alternating to either the middle finger or the index finger. Thumb, middle finger, thumb, index finger. And that one bar is repeated 3 times in a row. Now the single difference, and the 4th bar is an A minor chord strummed downward, a G chord. And then you end that very last bar, the last beat is a hammer-on from an open E string, 3rd fret with the ring finger, and then you're straight back into a repeat of the exact same thing we just played. There was one thing I forgot to mention. You're starting the song with an open E string and a G on the 3rd fret of the E string. This is an upbeat, so when you count in the song, it goes like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And then you continue straight into the verse. Let me do that one time, a little bit slower so you can follow along really nicely. But as you see, the intro is only 2 bars. The very first bar is repeated 3 times, and the next bar is only that A minor chord and G chord. That's all there's to it. One more time, I'll cut it in as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. You're off into the verse. Let me play the verse for you one time. Now, I'm going to stick to a certain method throughout this tutorial. For the first verse, I'm just going to focus on the melody and nothing else. I won't be adding in any fills, any extras. It's just the melody and nothing else. When I explain the second verse, that's when I'll start introducing just a few variations to spicing it up a little as you go along. Okay, so first, let's have a look at the most basic version of the song, which you have to get down before you add in any variations. Here we go. So that's the whole verse. Now let's have a quick look. We're starting again around that same A minor chord. Now if you listen closely to what I just played, you might have noticed a few gaps here and there that you don't hear when you hear Tommy play the song. That's what I will cover in the second verse. So first we're going to go over this section and we're only going to have a look at the melody. So you get that into your fingers really well. Make sure it's in your ears as well, that you know exactly what it should sound like. And then in the second verse we'll be adding in some variations and we'll start fleshing out that backing of the melody a little bit more. Let's have a look at the melody first. So that first hammer-on is what we already saw in the intro. Let me play only what the verse sounds like. That's the first 2 bars right there. Let's have a look at the melody. We're starting out on an A minor chord. The very first beat is nothing but an open A bass string. Second beat, thumb pick on the D string, middle finger plucking an open B string. Third beat, thumb pick is moving to the low E bass note and we're adding in the index finger on the first fret to get a full A minor chord. And we're pulling off from the index finger, so a C on the B string, to an open B string. This has to be an exact 8th note rhythm, so both notes have to be exactly as long. The first one isn't longer than the other, it has to be exact 8th notes. So you land in the next beat, on the third beat, on a ring finger, 3rd fret on the A note. Since you're already holding down that A minor chord, you don't have to actually finger anything extra, it's already there. So those are the first few beats. And now if we want to round out that very first bar, we have to play one more open B string. first bar. Make sure that that last rhythm on top is exact 8 notes. Every note is exactly as long as the other, with a bass note underneath. And the only thing we're doing in the second bar is adding in that index finger again. Again, on the second beat, thumb pick and middle finger together. And for now, we'll just continue playing that bass pattern throughout the second bar. In the second verse, I'm going to explain how to fill this out a little bit more. But right now, we're sticking only to the melody. Moving to a G chord, you're just moving the ring finger down here. Let me play the melody one time. So that was already the fourth bar as well. So we're moving to a low G bass note, ring finger 3rd fret on the low E string, and everything else is open. You don't have to play a full G chord, as we use mostly open strings for this lick. And the tricky thing about this one, the beginning is rather simple, so you're again playing the same boom chick pattern, only you're using 2 strings now, so only the G string and the D string. Then in between, you're going to play the open G string 2 times. That's the beginning. And then after the 3rd bass note, you're going to hammer on to the 2nd fret with the middle finger. Make sure you keep the bass note down. Don't lift it up, make sure it doesn't get muted as you hammer down that 2nd fret. That's the next move. Adding in the next note together with the D bass note, you're going to play an open B string again. See, really slowly. And at the end, it's just the D string and the B string together. To round out that bar, you only need one more open G string. Straight away, to head into the next bar, you're going to hammer on to sort of an A power chord fingering, middle finger and index finger on the 2nd fret. If you're quick enough, you can already switch right over back to the same fingering you need for an A minor chord. Works just as well. And again, there it's really important, once you hammer on, at the exact same time the hammer on comes down, you play the open A bass string. Starting from the G chord. And you're ending that bar with an open E string. Again, 3rd fret on the E string, giving you a G to lead straight back into the second part of the verse. Let me play what you have now back to back with each other. So that's what we saw up until now. The really tricky part in this section is that extended or that delayed hammer on the G string. Make sure you spend some time getting that timing right, and then you're good to go. One more time, the first section, and I'm going to continue into the next few bars. That should look familiar, it's exactly the same thing as we saw in the first two bars. So the main melody, the thing that keeps popping up again and again, is already here in your fingers. That little melody on the A minor chord, you're gonna have to play that a bunch of times. So make sure you get that down really well. I'm gonna show you one more thing concerning that transition coming from the G chord. I always play it index finger, middle finger. If you have the possibility now, this is how I learned it many years ago, and I find it quite hard to get it out of my fingers. If you manage to learn it like this, and using the pinky for the bass note, that's actually a lot more economic in terms of movement. Heading straight for that A minor chord voicing with the correct fingering will make for an easier transition into the next part. See if it works for you. I learned it the wrong way. I find it really hard when I'm playing on autopilot to leave it out now. If this is the first time you're learning it, I would do it like this. And then straight into the next part. Then, the second part, we already saw the first few bars. A double pull-off lick. So the first two bars are exactly the same thing. Two bass notes when entering the same G chord. G on the low E string, open D string, and then a pull-off from the first fret index finger to an open string, and again a pull-off second fret on the G string, an A note to an open G string. And this is a bit trickier than before because you're always aiming to get the note after the pull-off to land on the bass note. So if you have to do it this slow, that's okay. If you have to do it even slower, then that's okay too. This is a really important technique to get down, to get the timing of those hammer-ons and pull-offs to completely connect to the bass line pattern. One more time, really slowly. So as you pull off, you're aiming for the bass note at the exact same time the pull-off leaves the string. So make sure you get that down 100%. We're ending this little section with the fourth bar with again a hammer-on from an open G string to the second fret while playing the bass pattern over the A minor chord. And that's the only difference. We're adding in an open B string as a transition to the next section. So back to back, those last four bars. To a C chord. Now let me first play what we haven't up until this point, those full 8 bars back to back. Then we're continuing into the next section. Next section. Let me stop it there. So you're moving to a C chord, and now there's one bit of a strange thing happening, something you won't have to do too often. The thumb pick will now use or have to be used to play the bass note on the G string. This doesn't happen too often. Normally you're sticking to the first, second and third string, or sorry, the low E string, low A string and the D string. Now you will have to use the G string, which is quite high up for the thumb pick. So this might feel a bit awkward in the beginning. Same trick, hammering on while aiming for the bass note. So as you're hammering on with the pinky to the 3rd fret, you have to play the C bass note at the exact same time. The rest of the picking pattern isn't too difficult. I use the middle finger for most of the melody notes here. Maybe the ring finger for that top open E string. Leaving out that last D note in front of the beat, but make sure this rings out as you move to the next bass note. If you mute this melody note, the whole effect is gonna be ruined. So make sure that that D note actually rings out while you're moving to the B bass note on the 2nd fret of the A string. As for that, make sure that open E string rings out as well. Make sure that as much as possible leave things ringing out throughout this section. You will also notice that Tommy actually lightens up the muting in this part particularly. He's almost not using muting at all, and it will come back at the end of this section. So again, the C chord to a G over B chord, an A minor chord, but we're only playing the strings we need, so we're not fingering a full A minor chord, but just open string, 1st fret on the B string, and then moving to a G chord, but again we're only playing the 3rd fret on the low E string and the B string as an open string. Ending up on an open D string and then moving to an A minor chord. Closing out that little section with an E minor chord at the end. Now, if you look at the hammer-on pattern over that A minor chord, if you already had a quick look at the recent Luttrell tutorial video, which is a lot harder song than this one, but that hammer-on pattern will probably seem familiar because it's the exact same thing. We're starting out on an A minor chord, but we're only starting with an open A string and the 2nd fret with the middle finger on the D string. Everything else, if we start out, are open strings. Then we're moving with a hammer-on. As we move to the bass string to the bass note on D string, we're hammering on to the 2nd fret again, landing at the exact same time. Adding in the open B string. So that open B string is played in between the bass note on the D string, the bass note on the E string. Adding in a hammer-on that B string to the 1st fret. Again, that 1st fret will land at the exact same time as the thumb pick is playing the low E string. Exactly the same thing as in Luttrell, we'll be now extending that hammer-on run with a hammer-on to the 3rd fret on the B string with the pinky. This will probably take some time. If you've never done this before, combining those hammer-ons with the bass pattern that has to keep going all the way through, this will take some time, but no worries. Take your time, make sure you get this down 100%, because this is a really vital part of Tommy's technique and the way he writes and arranges songs. So take your time, especially for this little section. Ending up on an open B string. Back to the low E string, because now we're moving to an E minor chord. That will probably be more than easy after the last few bars. Together with the bass note on the D string, 2nd fret as a melody note, and then back to an open G string together with the low E string. Now, up until this point, like I already explained, you should have loosened up the muting just a little bit. There's no need for the bass notes to sound completely open, but the muting is just slightly lighter than in the beginning of the song. This is the point where that changes again. This is where you will tighten up the muting again, because Tommy does one thing that he doesn't do this often, but he's gonna move the melody line just for 2 notes, sorry, not one, but 2 notes, to one of the bass strings, and you're going to play it with a thumb pick as well. So and that's what you should do. Again, exact 2 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we'll connect that next section right away. So again, these 4 bars back to back. And now we're moving into that winding section that moves up the neck. But this is actually one of the easier parts, especially if you already got all those combinations of technique down. What we're doing is we're playing a slide with the ring finger from the 5th fret to the 7th fret on the D string. And then right away you will start tightening that muting again on the bass string. Bass part is always the A string to the D string to the E string to the D string. And right after that slide, you will tighten up the muting right away. Now let's have a look at the melody on top. First, that little section, it's not too hard. Once you get the fingering down, the melody notes are actually always played in between the bass notes. Starting with the index finger on the 4th fret, which might be a bit of a stretch. And you move that up straight away to the 5th fret. Then adding in the pinky on the 7th fret on the G string. Flattening the index finger to a little bar across the 5th fret, moving to the B string. Then pinky, 8th fret on the B string again. Moving to the high E string, just keeping down that bar, playing a high A note. Adding in the pinky on the 7th fret on the high E string. And then, this is rather quick, you're moving up the pinky to the 8th fret and the ring finger will move to the 8th fret on the A string as well. Playing the melody note in front of the bass note, so you're playing the pinky first and then the thumb pick on that F note on the A string, 8th fret. And now, this is a bit of a stretch, the middle finger will drop down on the 7th fret on the high E string and you will play that together with the 5th fret on the G string. Now, if you play this together, it sounds a bit strange, but trust me, in the flow of this lick, it actually sounds fine. Bass note in front, together, moving down to with the ring finger to the 7th fret, adding in the pinky on the 8th fret, playing a bass note at the 5th fret, again fingering with the bar here, to a single A note on top, open A bass string, and then a full A minor chord to stop. And that's the full verse. Let me play those 8 bars back to back. Into the second verse. Before we continue into the second verse, let me play the first verse in full, really slowly, so you can follow along, maybe pick up anything you missed along the way, and then we're heading straight into the second verse. Opening the bass a bit. So that was part 1 of the Countrywide tutorial. We looked at the intro and the verse in great detail. Part 2 is online as well. In that we will look at the second verse and the bridge as well as the ending. Have fun with it. Bye bye.